Okay, well, I'm chatting with Carson Cooman, the American composer, Carson Cooman, organist. We'll discuss that because the very purpose of our discussion this evening is about your really absolutely wonderful and wonderfully entertaining CD of your own original organ works, Owl Night. Wonderful choice of title among the pieces that were on the CD that you might have chosen from. Played by, now this is really cool, I think, and why don't we start there? Here you are, an organist. And of course you've written your own music. You could have as easily produced this CD by yourself, could you not?
Sure. Yeah, I don't play a lot of my own pieces as an organist.
Aha.
My interest as a performer has always been in the exploration and discovery of new works by other composers, and so I sort of know too much about my own pieces. So I don't get the same thing out of them that I do when I'm exploring someone else's work. So as a performer, I tend to play mostly other people's music.
Interesting, because your catalog of other people's music, because I see them popping up all the time on Facebook and so on, is just absolutely enormous, let alone your own original organ works. But what I was getting at was your collaborator, the organist, Eric Simmons.
Eric Simmons.
Why don't we just start there? Tell me the story of you two and how that all came about. How come you trust Eric Simmons to perform the CD?
So we came to know each other online through a recording that he had made of some early music some years ago now, probably 8 or so years ago now, that I was in discussion with him about using a recording of his for a class I was then teaching. And that sort of has led to a collaboration, his enthusiasm for playing and recording my pieces, and this ongoing CD series that we've been doing of my organ works for Divine Art. It's just sort of snowballed from there. We've just sort of finished one and then started the next. So, and then before you know it, we've been going along.
Where is Owl Night in that sequence of recordings of your music? Any idea? Just ballparking it even?
This is number 7, and we finished about 12 so far.
It's endless. You presumably you have either an endowed person of great wealth, or you're raising money or something. I mean, how's that working in terms of funding?
Well, we've been able to produce them fairly inexpensively because they're recorded using the Hauptwerk system, which you may have seen mentioned in the booklet, where the organ, Eric records them at home in Portland, Oregon. And the Hauptwerk system is a sort of software-based sampler for pipe organs, where an original organ is recorded pipe by pipe in its original acoustic, and that's the sort of enormous thing, which is why the recorded result sounds very realistic, because it actually is the actual sound of the organ recorded in its space. But he can trigger that from his console at home. I have a similar setup in my living room. I use it to practice and make many recordings myself with. So that technology has meant that the number of recordings that we can produce is significantly higher than it would be. Recording organs live is a very expensive proposition. The inconvenience of the venues, plus all the normal sound editing and such that goes into a recording. But you often are recording at night in churches, and you're dealing constantly with acoustic interruptions that you don't have, if you were recording a string quartet in the studio. Yeah. So since he and I have been working on this, and since we've been using this technology, in both our cases, our recorded output has been able to be increased dramatically. I could probably record literally about 1/100th of the number of pieces that I'm able to record of other people if I had to do it. Renting a church and spending all night doing it.
Now let me. That was the mailman. It wasn't a dog barking.
Oh, yes.
I run on a busy street and the traffic and everything else. It's quite amusing.
Yes, well, that's exactly that's like what recording in a church is like. There's always background noise.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I actually stumbled into this question because I had not seen that mentioned in the program. I just overlooked it. And now, but now we're on to something really rather juicy. Let me see if I understood you. Which is to say, on this CD you mentioned the Saint Etienne
yes.
organ, the wonderful 1066 Norman Conquest's cathedral, and then, as we discussed off camera, wonderful, fabulous 19th century organ is in that church. So
yes,
in other words, so this is you can fish around and choose. Oh, I think I'll do a Saint Etienne, and pull a sampling of all of the sounds from that organ. It's amazing.
Right. It's the entire instrument in its unity behaving as it does large in live things. So it's not sort of a mix and match of different organs or anything. It's an exact, and in the same way that other CDs that we've done are on different organs that have been modeled in exactly the same way, but in other locations.
Absolutely incredible. My mind is blown away. We have reached a sophistication electronically that is fabulous and a little scary.
It is. It's the organ is a particularly effective instrument for this kind of technology because of how it works mechanically, and because there isn't the expressivity of the organ doesn't come from the same factors that, say, playing the clarinet does. I think it would be very difficult to make a clarinet of the same thing. But the fact that an organ is based so much on pressing a key and getting a sound related to that makes it sort of extremely effective for this kind of technology that's become very popular now with organists, particularly for home practice and things. It's just a completely different experience than the sort of electronic organ that some people are familiar with, from home or churches that don't have the money for a proper pipe instrument.
Yeah. So, wow, we've come a long way. And by the way, this reminds me, I really need to introduce you a little more with a bit more certainty to our audience out there. Carson Cooman is composer in residence. Correct me if you've moved on, but last time I looked, you were composer in residence at Memorial Church, Harvard University.
Correct.
And that explains why I had to run to the dictionary twice to look up words. And it also explains why your program notes are scholarly, and I'm complimenting you. Hats off for the scholarly program notes. But it goes with the territory somehow. You're a Harvardian. There's something about that. Just the level of intellect involved is always so refreshing and exciting. As I said, I had to run to the dictionary I can't even pronounce a couple of these words that you refer to as one of your program pieces. In fact, it's time for me to pin you down on this one. I think yes, Richachara in epidiotesaron, something like that.
Yes.
Tell me the word. I think I did look it up. Something simple in terms of its meaning.
Yes, it just refers to the fact that the second it's a contrapuntal piece, and it just refers to the fact that the second voice enters at the interval of a fourth above. That's what the Greek just comes from that old It's just very old terminology. You'd find similar terminology in old music.
That's what you get for having your nose in your liber usualis too much. Something
That's
like
right.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. What else can I do? As I mentioned, this enormous output, and we have a better idea now. It's easier. Anyway,
well, recording wise, it's both financially and logistically easier to produce a large number of CDs than it was in the past. Yeah.
Then there's just the small issue of how come, at what point, why, where, from whom, by whom did you decide, organ, that's it. I'm imagining as a little child, you receive your little toy piano and you fly into a rage because it's not a toy organ.
No, most organists begin by studying the piano, and I certainly did. And I, like most organists, sort of encountered the organ as a listener. In my case, it was in church. That's true for most people. Yeah. Is where you sort of first hear it, and that sort of led to an interest that sort of brought me to switch over it to my main instrument. Sort of about my early teens was sort of when I really made that switch and put the piano behind me and really focused on the organ.
And also from the point of view of a composer, come to think of it, you have this gigantic choice of colors. This amazing.
It is.
The instrument
a lot of possibility.
Speaking of an electronic device, from from the Baroque period on, that is essentially a computer, if you will.
Yeah, it has a lot of sound possibility.
And you've used it, by the way. I wanted to talk. What I'm going to do is throw out a couple of things. Are we happy about Eric Simmons? Have we given him enough credit? What does he do during his day job when he's not?
He's an engineer. He works in sort of product development with sort of team strategies and helping groups develop products and things.
You know, I've never understood that kind of musical mind. Frankly, the mathematical sort of musical mind, which I have a feeling yours is also.
Well, no, not really. I'm not. No, I wouldn't say. I wouldn't. I know I don't have a particularly mathematically or engineering inclined mind, but there certainly are plenty of musicians who do. Yeah.
And by the way, I do apologize because a little further down somewhere I made a note about, in my view, this CD. By the way, it's all wonderfully accessible, fabulous music that organists and I was going to ask you a question about, well, you know, modern contemporary organ music. Do the church folk have interest? But your music is so accessible and so interesting and so beautiful. So that question went out the window. But what I'm getting at is composing contemporary music for the organ. How has that been received in terms of your playing your music and other contemporary works? In terms of just people that come into church.
No, I've certainly found people receptive. The contemporary music I play does tend to lean perhaps a bit more towards the accessible end than, like any genre of music right now, there's the whole gamut of things available. And I certainly do perform some pieces that are at the further end, away from accessibility, but it is a more limited thing. Most of the time you're playing recitals in contexts where you have people that are unfamiliar with the organ and certainly unfamiliar with contemporary music, and so I feel the best way is not to throw them at them at once in terms of things that they are unfamiliar with. So though I do play only contemporary music, the programs at least I consider them to be really quite accessible. But organists in general are fairly receptive to contemporary music. I think some of that is because most organists work in the church at some level, and you simply, as a church musician, you simply need a lot more music than you do as other things. You know, you can be a concert pianist and play only the same 6 pieces on every concert all year round. You can't do that as an organist in the church or a director of a choir. You know, you have people in the pew every week who need new material. So that there is a much broader and wider openness than you find in certain performing genres. And I think that's been true for a long time. So in that sense, though one might think because of the organs association with the church and stuff that would lead to a certain musical conservatism, I've actually found that there's quite an openness to new works simply because of the variety of material that people need.
Very, very nice. I feel much better. And by the way, I was going to, you spoke up quite quickly and stole a little bit from me, which is I should have known better because your music, I think I maybe already mentioned, but your music is narrative, and I don't even know quite what I'm trying to say. But somehow or other, all of the music on this disc, there's a narrative. Now it's wonderful structure, compositional process. Everything is making sense. I love your subtle little inner lines that I hear, quaint, kind of amusing even sometimes. I love the idea that composers, sort of hide trinkets maybe and wait to see if anyone can. Does that make any sense? But is there anything about narration and narrative quality of your music?
Well, I think I'm always very conscious of the fact that music is a time art. It's an art that takes, you're taking up someone's time in real time. It's very different than making a painting where someone can engage with it in entirely their own speed. They can sit on a bench and stare at it for 20 minutes, or they can walk by it in 10 seconds. And music doesn't work like that. Once, the audience or the listener is, sure, you can pause a recording or whatnot, but basically, in the context in which music is performed, like if you're presenting someone a 5-minute piece, you're taking up 5 minutes of their time, and they're going to experience in that way. And so I in all genres, this is not just related to organ music, but certainly in all genres of the composer, I feel very conscious of that. And so perhaps at some level that plays into what you were saying with narrative, and that I'm conscious of the fact that I want to use that time in a way that I feel is compelling, I hope, and interesting to the person whose time I'm taking up. And that there's sort of a reason, if the piece is a 10-minute piece, there's a reason for that.
Exactly right, and also journey was another word, but those were, I don't often just hunt and peck for some crazy idea, but is this narrative, for lack of another word, sense to your writing. I think what I'd like to do at this point is maybe let me mention a couple of pieces and have you
Sure.
chat to me about them, and then why don't you tell me what I've missed that you really would like to speak to on that CD. You've got the CD in front of you.
I do have it here. Yeah.
The two mantras which open the CD. The beautiful meditation. The meditation is beautifully meditative. By the way, I was going to ask you about minimalism. In a way, I hear. Would you agree with a certain idea about minimalism?
Sure. I think there are very few. I think there are very few composers of my age. I'm in my late 30s who have not had some sort of reaction to many of the different things that have come before us in the past several decades, and certainly minimalism and post-minimalism things is one of those. And though I think there are relatively few composers whose work fits neatly into a single box, I certainly think there are many of us who draw on different elements, or different pieces might lean one way or another. Certainly, both of those two pieces those two mantras certainly have elements that have pattern repetition and things that of course would not be what they were had not minimalism existed, even if they aren't sort of strict minimalist pieces, whatever that would mean today.
Yeah, and also in terms of the second of the two mantras, postludium, what a joyous shot in the arm of optimism and giddy, ecstatic music making. It's just perfect. People, I'm sure any church crowd, you know what I mean, any congregation would have no trouble understanding instantly the joy and the positivity and the pace and wonderfulness of that. Owl Night. Speaking of minimalism, and by the way, what, where, how the title Owl Night?
Oh, it's just it sort of just an evocative image. Just sort of thinking of
It is.
It's sort of to me it's sort of nothing necessarily more than that.
Very simple, very calm.
It is. It's a very small amount of music in that piece that the performer then has the freedom to extend or repeat in certain ways as they want. It was a piece written for Eva Maria Huben, who's a German composer and organist, whose own work is certainly far more experimental, quote unquote, in style than mine is. But I've recorded. I've made a double CD of her music. And this was just a little piece written for her. And although to me it's still very much a piece of mine, the harmony moves in the way that I like harmony to move. The idea of this very small amount of material that can be spread out over a large amount of time, that's certainly something that she is preoccupied with. So that's why that piece partakes a little of that, since I wrote it for her.
Okay, so having arrived at the earlier question when I was putting my notes together about narrative, naturally I listened to Owl Night and I really actually found myself trying to imagine, it's dark, I'm coasting, I'm an owl, I'm coasting over a still, quiet night. I mean, you're talking about evocative, even if you didn't particularly mean such.
There's a certain sense of atmosphere, which is absolutely a part of it. Yeah.
What else? Let me see what else I took some notes about. Well, a great major masterpiece on this CD is, of course, the last piece. I think it's the longest piece, even on the piece, this toccata, aria, and finale. I mean, in my notes, it's a masterpiece in every particular, as we've said before, architecturally. The whole thing makes such fabulous sense. The toccata is absolutely stunning. The subtleties of your harmonic movement, lovely discrete inner voicing, as I mentioned, lots and lots to listen to. What's it like to have, by the way, for the finale, that kind of, and did this lure you at age 5? I mean, there is tremendous power under your fingers when you are
Sure. I think everyone that's attracted to the organ is at some level attracted to that part of it. Some people, I think, are overly attracted to that side of the organ and only want to play loud and fast music. But for me, the whole gamut is what interests me now. But there's no question, and particularly as a young person, that the sheer power of effect that the instrument can produce with only one player is unrivaled by anything. There's nothing else that one player can produce that kind of power and real musicianship with.
It's rather godlike.
Yeah, I I don't know. I don't know. It makes an impression, certainly. It certainly, the instrument can certainly make an impression, and the wide range is really something I find appealing. The fact that it can also make some of the quietest sounds, nearly, many organs can make sort of nearly inaudible sounds, and then all from there all the way up to the sort of loudest things you can do as one person.
I've mentioned to you that all of us are idiots about the organ, except organists. It's a big thing to grapple with intellectually. Sure. And all the rest of it. And by the way, I was thinking of the trumpet. I'm going to use the word stop. I hope I've got the right terminology. But the trumpet stop you use in the first movement of Concerto Piccolo. Speaking of power and color and all the rest of it. Can you, I don't know, without me sounding like I'm an idiot asking a stupid question, but can you kind of give us we who want to know, who know a lot about music and want to know a little more about, can you nutshell what this creature is and how it works?
The organ? Yeah.
That's right.
There's I think the variety, many different families of sound is certainly something that creates a distinct impression. And I think, one can go online and find, a video of seeing what an organ looks like or how it's played and all. I think the fact that every instrument is different, every organ is different from every other one. There are no two that are exactly the same is something that's it's I think very daunting to some people that aren't organists to sort of imagine dealing with that kind of variety of instruments. They are very wildly in size, in musical style, in all their components. I mean, at some level, they're all instruments that use wind and are controlled via keyboards for the hands and the feet at some level. But beyond that, basically everything else is sort of up for grabs in terms of what you're going to have on what sort of sounds you'll have on a given instrument. And what those possibilities are. And certainly composers throughout the ages have taken advantage of that in the fact that organ music is quite varied in terms of what kind of instruments it sounds best on, or how it's ideally realized on different kinds of things. But no, it's a very complex instrument. So certainly it's for those that aren't organists, I think you're right. There is sometimes, but on the other hand, it like any instrument, it produces sound, and so you don't necessarily need to know all the details of it any more than you need to know the details of how to play the bassoon to potentially enjoy a bassoon piece, even if perhaps there might be fewer details of the bassoon. I don't know, but
except that they're both hard.
Right. I mean, sort of every instrument has its own set of challenges. Certainly, I think the organ is sometimes confusing to people because it has finger keyboards like a piano does, and people tend to understand the piano fairly well. It's the most widespread. If anyone has any facility, it's probably a little bit on the. And so I think that the fact that it's actually such a very different instrument from the piano is, I think, perhaps initially confusing to people because they see someone sitting down and moving their fingers in the way that a pianist might
on 5 keyboards.
Right, on multiple keyboards and also using. So I mean, the differences present themselves quickly, but no one is surprised that a piccolo is very different from a piano because anyone looking at it can see that they're played in entirely different ways. But I think on a very quick glance, someone might think that there's a lot of similarity technique-wise between the organ and the piano. And while the basic finger motion has some similarity, the differences are really far more numerous than the similarities.
And in case anybody is, I know most of our colleagues that are watching this are fine with this, but I would just want to remind those who wonder about the organ, it doesn't just sit there. It does have to be tuned.
Yeah.
And it can be a monster. In my youth in Seattle, one of the Fisks, and I can't remember his name anymore, but anyway, I would kind of follow him around. A young guy, he was my age, or late 20s, early 30s. I think it was one of the Fisks, but one of the great, sons of one of the great organ makers. That's how he, paid rent stuff. He went around tuning organs, and that was quite a revelation. You really have to open. It's like a car mechanic. You pull all the
it's a big
all these tools.
And most firms that build organs also make a lot of their income from the tuning and service that
Sure,
has to be done
that's
for
right.
them, certainly.
Yeah.
So
What is
those tend to coexist in the same organization, which is of course not true. Your piano tuner is not the person who built your piano, say, but organ tuners have a lot of the understanding of what goes into organ building, even if they aren't primarily builders, and many actually are.
Yeah. And let's just do a little rundown here about trajectory. First of all, I remember now what I was getting at. I think I spoke to you, or I even spoke during this interview. I really thought you were pretty much exclusively composing organ music. But tell me a little bit more about tell me about the other repertoire that you're.
I've written in basically every genre except ballet. I have sort of things and everything. As a composer, I've sort of always been interested in a wide variety of things. I have written a lot of organ music. It's true, and the last few years I've written quite a lot of it. But it's more of just sort of certain circumstances and projects coming together.
Sure.
But for many years, there were many years where I wrote far more other things than I ever did organ music, and that's the whole gamut of things: chamber music, solo, vocal, choral, orchestral, opera.
And by the way, you've been an organist through all of that. Did one help the other? Did it help in terms of, let's see, writing an orchestral piece, to be an organist, to understand the capacities of colors?
For me, it was never sort of consciously connected. I mean, I'm the same person, so I'm sure there's something there. For me, they were always very separate disciplines. My composition doesn't really come out of my organ playing, and those are, I do them at different times, and sort of, to me, they satisfy very different impulses within me. The impulse to practice and perform contemporary music that I love by other composers is a different impulse from the impulse of composing for whatever. But of course they're going to have some impact on each other. The music I play by other people certainly has a degree of influence on me, and the sort of things that I like or I'm attracted to in the work of other people at some level will have an impact on my own writing. Absolutely.
Career trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
Are you happy? Are you okay? Are you doing fine? Do you have?
I'm perfectly happy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm doing the things I love to do, and so to be interested in my doing them. So
your album 346 of your continuing series of organ works is coming out when?
Yeah, the most recent volume just came out this past month, early November, and there's a few more in the pipeline for future years. So
you pop up all the time. I can tell you that. That's for sure. From trolling all.
So we'll see. Eric, as long as Eric continues to be enthusiastic, we'll keep at it. But yeah, you finish one piece and start the next.
So he understands your writing.
Yes. He's taken to it very he took to it really very quickly, I felt, and seems to really understand what I'm doing and delivering. So we wouldn't have made all these CDs, I think, if we didn't.
Yeah.
I think if it didn't go both, if I weren't happy with his playing, or if he didn't find the music worth the countless hours that he spent on it, I think from both directions we're clearly satisfied. We're not masochistic, so we're doing it because I think we're genuinely satisfied with what's coming out of it.
Well,
he like me has always had a repertoire interest in things that are not just, say, the standard repertoire that everyone plays all the time, and that's something we both share as an interest. And I think that's something that connects us as well.
Yeah, wonderful. It's a wonderful collaboration indeed. What else was I going to ask? I think I've about covered it. If you're looking at those 17 works on this CD, okay, it's the stupidest question ever, but tell me, is there a favorite, or?
I don't know. Eric chose this group of pieces for this album. They were all
that's interesting.
Within a fairly short period of time, but he's generally made at least the first pass as to which things go on which CDs, and I'll weigh in.
Sure.
And discuss it, but in general, the CDs are more his conception than they are mine in terms of what pieces, and he really organized this based on how many different things these pieces did, and I do like that about it. I think they're quite different expressively. They're certainly very different. I think they all have certain things in common because they're all written by the same person, but the technical means by which they're written is also somewhat different. You mentioned the sort of minimalism influence in the mantras, and there's the sort of Vondel Weiser style bit of that sort of spacious experimentalism in the Owl Night, and the Concerto Piccolo is written with 12-tone, some 12-tone methods because of the Eberhard Krauss, in whose memory it was written, was a composer that had developed a very idiosyncratic way of using 12-tone music. And the piece is not written in his style, but I sort of took some of his material and used it to make my sounds from it.
An homage.
But again, it's sort of very different. An homage. It sounds like me, but is written with some of his methods. And so the technical means, say, are very different. That sort of bring those things together, and likewise for the other pieces.
And you
have different.
You dedicate all of these pieces to various organists, so they are in a way part and parcel of your inspiration.
They are, yeah. No question. Yeah, my as a composer, I've never had much motivation for writing music that isn't connected to people and circumstances, commissions, projects, specific things. Some people are, extremely motivated by just whatever they want to do. Some people couldn't fulfill commissions even if they wanted to. And for me, I'm definitely at the other end of that spectrum. I write music because people ask for it and seem to want it and use it. And that's to me what inspires the pieces, not some sort of necessarily some abstract thing. And suddenly the context for which the piece is being written then suddenly pulls into focus all of the things that are going to be a part of it.
Yeah, and by the way, that's the biz.
Yeah.
That's the biz. We do. Hello, everybody. We do try and make a living in this crazy profession of ours. Well, I think we better wind it down. I am having a great chat. You're in where? Are you in Boston area?
In Cambridge.
Cambridge.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, Harvard. Anyway, I'm speaking with American composer Carson Cooman. This is a 2017 Divine Art release. It's called Owl Night, this CD.
Yes.
All his original organ music performed brilliantly by his collaborator, fellow organist Eric Simmons. And now we know that the genius of modern technology. You selected Saint-Étienne in France. I hope I'm anywhere close to pronouncing it properly. And that particular organ, which has it's almost like that in Norway or Iceland or something, the underground container for all the seeds of all the planet. It's beautiful that these fabulous historic organs can be sampled, if you will, electronically, and then can recreate. You can be in the sound of that building and the sound of that instrument. It's absolutely.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable how it's made available to not Eric and I are very far from the only people using this technology to perform and record, but it's I think it's a huge boon for organists and organ listeners, and the instruments that it's allowed to sort of reach far more people that can ever be in the room. Even as wonderful as being in the room is, this reaches a different audience as well.
Yes, exactly, and it costs money to go visit Saint-Étienne. From where I am, I take, as you may know, I take every summer I take a group of hearty souls on great adventures, and it's cheap and it ain't cheap. So this really brings the cathedral bring to the home, literally, in every sense of the word. Carson, many thanks.
Thank you, Dan.
Getting late in the evening. We are done. By the way, all of this, our interviews, some excerpts from the CD, on and on, pictures, all that good stuff will go up at performingartsreview.net. Putting in my little plug for my website, and I'll be sending out an e-blast.
Very good.
And my remarks will follow. Okay.
Excellent.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.